Welcome, my friend. I'm so glad you came. Let's share a calm and quiet moment together before we begin. Now imagine this. It is the year 1521, and you are standing on the deck of a small wooden ship in the middle of an endless ocean. There is no land in sight, no green island, no safe harbor. Only gray-blue water stretching farther than your eyes can see. Your food is almost gone. The drinking water smells bad. Some sailors are sick. Others are too weak to stand. You have been crossing this ocean for months. And the most frightening part is this. No one knows how much farther you must go. At the center of this desperate voyage is a Portuguese sailor named Ferdinand Magellan. He has already crossed one great ocean and found a secret passage through the edge of South America. But now, he faces something even greater. Magellan is trying to reach Asia by sailing west. And before this journey ends, his expedition will change the map of the world forever. But Magellan himself will never make it home. Ferdinand Magellan was born around 1480 in Portugal, a small country looking outward toward the sea. He grew up during the Age of Exploration, when Portuguese ships were sailing farther than ever before, searching for new trade routes to Africa, India, and Asia. As a young man, Magellan entered royal service and eventually joined voyages to the east. He sailed across the Indian Ocean and spent years learning about distant lands, dangerous seas, navigation, and trade. These experiences changed him. Magellan began to understand how valuable the Spice Islands were, especially the cloves and other spices that Europeans desperately wanted. But he also began to imagine something more daring. What if Asia could be reached not by sailing east around Africa, but by sailing west across the Atlantic? By now, Magellan understood something important. Portugal already controlled the eastern route to Asia, sailing around Africa and across the Indian Ocean. If he wanted to find something new, he had to look in the opposite direction. His idea was simple to explain, but incredibly dangerous to attempt. Magellan believed the Spice Islands could be reached by sailing west across the Atlantic, passing through or around South America, and then continuing toward Asia. The problem was that no one knew if such a passage actually existed. European maps were still incomplete. Huge parts of the world were uncertain, and the ocean beyond South America was almost completely unknown. Magellan first tried to gain support from Portugal, but his plan was rejected. So he made a bold decision. He left his homeland and went to Spain, Portugal's greatest rival. There, he presented his idea again. This time, the Spanish king listened, and Magellan finally received the ships, money, and men he needed. In September 1519, Magellan finally left Spain with 5 ships and about 270 men. The expedition sailed west across the Atlantic toward South America. At first, the ocean seemed calm, but everyone knew the real challenge was still ahead. Magellan was searching for something no map could clearly show. A passage through the southern part of the continent. When they reached the coast of South America, the ships began moving slowly south. Every large river and every narrow bay brought new hope. Could this be the hidden route to the other ocean? Again and again, the answer was no. The farther south they traveled, the colder the weather became. Winds grew stronger. The sea became rougher, and soon Magellan would face a danger even greater than the ocean itself. The journey grew colder and more dangerous as Magellan's ships moved south. Winter was coming, and the men were exhausted. Food was limited, the wind was bitter, and no one knew whether the passage Magellan promised even existed. Soon, fear turned into anger. Several Spanish captains no longer trusted their Portuguese commander. They believed Magellan was leading them toward death, and some decided to rebel. A mutiny began. For a moment, Magellan risked losing control of the entire expedition, but he reacted quickly and ruthlessly. He used loyal men to surprise the rebels, regained control of the ships, and punished the leaders severely. The rebellion was over, but the voyage had changed. Trust had been broken. Then another disaster came. The Santiago, one of the 5 ships, was wrecked while exploring the coast. Now only 4 ships remained. Many men wanted to turn back. Magellan refused. Somewhere ahead, he still believed, the hidden passage was waiting. In October 1520, after months of searching, Magellan finally saw something different. A narrow channel cutting deep into the southern edge of South America. Could this be the passage? The ships entered carefully. For days, they sailed between dark mountains and twisting waterways. The water was cold, the winds were unpredictable, and no one knew if the channel would lead anywhere. Then another problem came. The San Antonio turned back and secretly sailed toward Spain. Only 3 ships remained. Still, Magellan continued forward. At last, after weeks inside the mysterious passage, the sailors saw open water ahead. They had found a route through South America. The passage would later become known as the Strait of Magellan. But beyond it waited an ocean far larger than anyone expected. Beyond the strait, Magellan and his men entered a vast ocean that seemed strangely calm. Because the waters were peaceful when he first saw them, Magellan called it the Pacific, the peaceful sea. But the name would soon feel cruel. Magellan believed Asia was much closer than it really was. He expected the crossing to take only a few weeks. Instead, weeks became months. The ships sailed across an ocean so enormous that the men began to wonder if it would ever end. Fresh food disappeared. Water became foul. Sailors grew weak and sick. Some died before seeing land again. There was no easy way back. South America was far behind them, and Asia was still somewhere beyond the horizon. So they kept sailing. Day after day, they saw nothing but water and sky. Then, just when hope was beginning to disappear, signs of land finally appeared ahead. After one of the hardest crossings in history, the Pacific was about to give them an answer. In March 1521, after months of suffering across the Pacific, Magellan's exhausted crew finally reached the Mariana Islands, where they found fresh food and water. Soon after, they sailed west again and arrived in the Philippines. For the sailors, it felt like entering a different world. Magellan met local rulers, exchanged gifts, and formed friendly relationships with some of them. He also encouraged the spread of Christianity, and several leaders agreed to be baptized. These early successes made Magellan more confident. He began to believe that he could do more than explore and trade. He could influence local politics as well. But not every leader accepted his authority. On the island of Mactan, a chief named Lapu-Lapu refused to cooperate. Magellan decided to confront him. It would become the most dangerous decision of his entire voyage. On the morning of April 27, 1521, Magellan and a small group of men approached the island of Mactan. But the conditions were already against them. The water was too shallow for the larger ships to come close to shore, so Magellan and his men had to walk through the sea before reaching land. Waiting for them were the warriors of Lapu-Lapu. The fighting quickly became chaotic. Magellan's men had better weapons, but they were badly outnumbered. Arrows, spears, and stones came from every direction. As the Europeans began to retreat toward their boats, Magellan stayed behind with a few men to protect them. Then he was surrounded. Wounded and unable to escape, Ferdinand Magellan was killed on the beach. The man who had crossed the Atlantic found a passage through South America and sailed across the Pacific would never return home. And here is the great twist. Magellan himself never completed the voyage around the world. Magellan was dead, but the expedition was not over. The surviving sailors now faced a terrible question. Should they turn back or continue the journey their commander had begun? They chose to continue. With too few men to operate all the remaining ships, the crew abandoned and burned the Concepcion. Only the Trinidad and Victoria remained. At last, they reached the Spice Islands, the destination Magellan had dreamed of from the beginning. There, the ships were loaded with valuable cloves. But the journey home would be just as dangerous. The Trinidad developed serious problems and could not continue as planned. That left only one ship with a real chance of returning to Spain. Her name was Victoria. And now, another captain would have to finish what Magellan had started. With Magellan gone and the Trinidad unable to continue, the Victoria became the expedition's last hope. Command of the ship eventually passed to Juan Sebastian Elcano, a Spanish sailor who now faced an enormous challenge: bring the surviving crew home. Instead of returning across the Pacific, Elcano chose to continue west. The Victoria crossed the Indian Ocean, trying to avoid Portuguese ships and trading posts. Food became scarce again. The men were exhausted, and every day brought new danger. Then they reached the southern tip of Africa. The waters around the Cape of Good Hope were violent, but Elcano pushed forward. At last, on September 6, 1522, the Victoria returned to Spain. Nearly 3 years had passed since the expedition began. Of the roughly 270 men who had originally sailed with Magellan, only 18 returned to Spain aboard the Victoria. They had done something no expedition had ever completed before. They had sailed around the world. And here is the part of the story that is often misunderstood. Ferdinand Magellan did not complete the first voyage around the world himself. He had died in the Philippines more than a year before the Victoria returned to Spain. The men who completed the journey were Elcano and the surviving crew of the Victoria. It had crossed the Atlantic, found a passage through South America, sailed across the vast Pacific, reached Asia, crossed the Indian Ocean, rounded Africa, and finally returned to Europe. For the first time, one expedition had completed a full voyage around the Earth. The journey also revealed something Europeans had badly underestimated: the true size of the Pacific Ocean. Magellan had set out to find a western route to the Spice Islands. Instead, the voyage revealed something much bigger. The world was far larger, more connected, and more difficult to cross than Europeans had imagined. Ferdinand Magellan is often remembered as a fearless explorer, but the real man was more complicated. He was courageous, determined, and willing to sail into waters that few Europeans understood. He survived storms, hunger, rebellion, and months of uncertainty without giving up on his goal. But Magellan could also be harsh. When his captains rebelled, he punished them severely to keep control of the expedition. In the Philippines, his growing confidence led him beyond exploration and trade. He became involved in local politics and tried to use his power to influence rulers. That decision brought him to Mactan and to his death. So, how should we remember him? As a brilliant navigator who helped open a new chapter in global exploration. As an ambitious commander who sometimes went too far? Perhaps the answer is both. Magellan's story reminds us that history is rarely simple. Great achievements can come from people who were brave, flawed, and deeply human. Magellan's legacy can still be found on the map today. At the southern edge of South America lies the Strait of Magellan, the narrow passage his expedition crossed in 1520. Beyond it is the Pacific Ocean, a name connected to the surprisingly calm waters Magellan encountered when he first entered it. His voyage also opened the way for later generations of sailors, explorers, merchants, and empires to think about the oceans as parts of one connected world. Magellan did not live to see what his journey would become, but more than 500 years later, his name remains attached to the very geography he risked everything to explore. Now return to that small wooden ship in the middle of the Pacific. Remember the exhausted sailors looking across an endless horizon. Their food was disappearing, their water was turning bad. Some were sick, and no one knew how much farther they had to sail. At that moment, they could not see what their journey would become. They could not see Spain behind them. They could not see Asia ahead of them. All they could see was the horizon, and still they sailed forward. Perhaps that is what makes this voyage so powerful even today. The men aboard those ships were not sailing across a world they understood. They were sailing into uncertainty. They made mistakes. They suffered. Many never returned home. But when the voyage was finally over, the map of the world no longer looked quite the same. Sometimes, history changes because someone knows exactly where they are going. And sometimes it changes because people are brave enough to continue when they do not. Learning English can feel a little like Magellan's journey across the Pacific. When you begin, you may know where you want to go, but you cannot always see how far the journey will be. Some days, progress feels easy. You understand new words, follow a story, and feel confident. Other days, it feels as if you are sailing across an endless ocean. You listen, you practice, but you cannot see the shore. That does not mean you are lost. Every new word you learn, every sentence you understand, and every story you finish moves you forward. You do not need to travel fast. You only need to keep going. So trust your journey, my friend. You may not always see how far you have come, but every story you understand is taking you somewhere new. And now, my friend, I have one simple question for you. Do you think Magellan should be remembered as a great explorer or as a man whose ambition took him too far? Write your answer in the comments. Even one short sentence is perfect. If you enjoyed learning English through this story, stay with us here at InkWell English. There are many more remarkable stories waiting to help you learn English. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep exploring. I'll see you in the next story, my friend.